Hello and welcome to the AI Localization Think Tank series, AI Research Explained. In this series, we break down important AI research into simple terms and discuss what it means for our industry. Today's episode is about a research paper titled Localized Cultural Knowledge is Conserved and Controllable in Large Language Models. It was published in April 2025. It starts with the following question. When an AI model speaks a language, does it also adopt the culture associated with that language? Let's see. If you ask an AI model in Japanese, what color is a pumpkin? The model will answer orange. And that makes perfect sense if we imagine the kind of pumpkins which are common in the United States and Europe. In Japan, however, pumpkins are commonly green. Now, if we change the question to what color is a pumpkin in Japan, the model will correctly answer green. So the model knows the culturally appropriate answer, but it cannot retrieve it when the only cultural clue is the language of the prompt. The model needs to be explicitly prompted for the context of Japan. The researchers call this gap in performance the explicit-implicit localization gap. Explicit localization means that the culture is clearly specified in the prompt, like in what color is a pumpkin in Japan. Implicit localization means that the culture is suggested indirectly, for example, through the language of the prompt. To study how big this explicit-implicit localization gap is, the researchers studied 5 languages and cultural settings: English and the United States, French and France, Russian and Russia, Turkish and Turkey, and Bengali and Bangladesh. The researchers tested 7 AI models on cultural questions. They aimed to find out how much better a model performs when explicitly prompted compared to when simply prompted in the local language. The result was a clear gap. Across most models, explicitly naming the cultural context improved the performance by more than 10 percentage points. And in one case, the gap was as big as 68 percentage points. Hence, prompting an AI model in the local language does not provide enough of a cultural clue. The model needs to have the culture clearly specified in the prompt to produce an answer that fits that culture. To indicate the culture, one does not need to be super specific, though. Just a single culturally specific word is enough to snap the model to the right cultural frame. For instance, when the researchers prefixed the prompts with culturally loaded words such as baguette or borщ or baklava, the model started producing more culturally aligned responses. So, was the problem solved? Not really. Explicit prompting improved cultural accuracy, but the answers became more similar and stereotypical. The explicit specification of the culture pushed the models towards creating cultural caricatures and producing less diverse responses. The researchers therefore asked the next question: can we activate cultural knowledge without placing an explicit cultural label in the prompt? They looked inside one model using a technique called activation patching. This allowed them to trace where cultural localization actually happened inside the network. And they found it. Cultural localization was concentrated in a specific band of middle layers, roughly between layers 23 to 30. That's where the model converted its default world model to one with a cultural flavor. Crucially, this same region lit up across different languages and different tasks, indicating that the mechanism is universal. And that led to the paper's most interesting experiment, steering. The researchers computed what's called a cultural vector. It's basically a vector encoding cultural direction. They found it by comparing the internal state of the model with explicit cultural context and without any cultural context. And then they isolated the difference to obtain the cultural vector. Then they simply added that cultural vector while the model was generating the responses. So when they added the Turkey vector, the model localized towards Turkish culture on its own. And when they subtracted it, the model drifted towards US culture. Using that steering vector recovered much of the accuracy of explicit prompting, but it kept the diversity of implicit prompting, produced fewer stereotypes, and stayed more faithful to the real culture. The researchers found also evidence of a more general or universal culture vector, which instructed the model to simply follow the culture associated with the language of the prompt. This improved performance, but remained weaker compared to using a culture-specific steering vector or explicit prompting. So, not quite the one magical culture switch we were hoping for. The central message of this paper is that large language models have some cultural knowledge but fail to surface it. The challenge then becomes how to activate that cultural knowledge without reducing it to stereotypes and cultural cliches. From this perspective, localization becomes the know-how how to steer that cultural knowledge encoded deep within the models to create culturally aligned translations.